Hello, I'm Tom Martin, and welcome to another episode of the San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series featuring yours truly, Tom Martin. I'm a lifelong journalist, having produced stories for Diane Sawyer at ABC Good Morning America and produced stories for Charles Brault at CBS News Sunday Morning, CNN, a few other networks thrown in for good measure. And I love learning new things. I love pushing, the envelope as far as conversation goes, and again, just learning. And so I'm thrilled every week to have an opportunity to talk with my dear friend, David Parker. David is the author of two great books, Income and Wealth and a San Francisco Conservative. And David is joining us from San Francisco. Hey, David, how are you?
I'm fine. Nice to see you this morning.
Great to see you. Great to see you. And you're a lifelong educator. You wear many hats. I think you said, maybe you can walk us through that again. You say you have 150 years of experience.
I suppose so. I had 4 careers simultaneously, and I'm not putting in 4 8-hour days simultaneously, but you learn to work smart and you delegate. But I was seriously in all 4. Yeah. I took them seriously. I prepared for whatever I was doing, and so you could say I taught inner city public schools music for 40 years, and I couldn't get enough. So I volunteered for 10 more years.
Wow.
That's 50 years. And that's in the trenches. That's not just talking about education. I'm not the administrator, I'm the teacher. It's
many lives. I bet you have some students that come up to you on the street and say you changed their life, something you said.
Yeah, I teach and I taught near where I live. So I'm in San Francisco, walking around the Mission District, going to the fish market. Students come up to me, students who are 40 years old come up to me, Mr. Parker, remember me? Oh, yeah, sure.
They probably look a little different. A few years have passed. Yeah,
yeah, and their kids, and I probably had their kids too.
Wow.
And we have parent-teacher conferences, and I tell them stuff when they're mixed up. I like to tell people stuff. They say, yeah, we remembered what you said, and to this day we talk about it. So we are thanking you.
Wow.
I get that all the time walking down the street. It's I'm not known anywhere else, but I'm known in the Mission District walking down the street.
That's right. Well, after this podcast series, you'll be nationally known. So
yeah,
wherever you go, yeah.
And now I'm walking down the street in every neighborhood. Okay.
That's right.
And then I played professional music. I played classical music and contemporary classical music. Very difficult. Schoenberg and Elliott Boulez and Elliott Carter, and that was with the Berkeley Symphony Orchestra. We recorded in Lucas Studios, Skywalker Ranch. I was in that world for a while. Wow. And then I got a little older. I was playing French horn. I was counting too many rests. I got tired of this. I wanted to play more. So I went back to string bass. I used to be a bass player when I was in college. And I just concentrated on it. And I picked up some of the best musicians in town. And we rehearsed and we played at least once a week. I have for the last 20 years. And we headlined the San Francisco's Fillmore Jazz Festival 2 years in a row. So I have really good musicians, and I have to practice. I can't come on the set, heads will turn. Parker, you're not practicing. I have to practice. I can't do that. And I'm orchestra, and I hear tunes on the radio, I'll write them down and say, guys, play this. So it's a very high, I'm making them all sweat on the set. It's a real set.
Excellent. It's funny. I can't resist throwing in as far as, hearing something on the radio and then bringing it into your jazz ensemble. One of my favorite days as a TV news producer was spending the day with Miles Davis in New York City. This was probably around 1985, 1986. He lived right across the street from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And I remember I was not that knowledgeable about jazz, so I was quite intimidated, but I brought my little tape recorder and I was asking him some questions. And I remember in that conversation, which I have recorded, actually, I'll have to send you a copy of that perhaps, but he was talking about how he loved the music of Prince, loved the music of Michael Jackson, and so on. And I was thinking to myself, I bet there's some jazz purists who do not want to hear the legendary Miles Davis say anything like that, but there was something in, that he detected when he heard a piece of music that really just spoke to him. And so he would do these cover versions of a Michael Jackson song or something like that. It was
No, he really grasped what was really fundamental about music. He also appreciated Santana, and he appreciated Sly Stone.
Wow.
They were friends, in fact. And people would ask Miles Davis when they went to his house, "What are you listening to?" He was listening to modern contemporary music, Stockhausen, Schoenberg, the stuff that I was playing in the Berkeley Symphony, not listening to jazz, but really innovative, creative music.
Wow.
And he heard in those musicians, including Santana, he heard stuff. He knew they were doing something right, and he grasped it. And his modern stuff, On the Corner, for example, they're classics. It's classic in jazz now. He was so far ahead of everybody. You could say Bob Dylan was ahead of people when he went to electric from guitar. People thought that was the biggest crime in the world. Pete Seeger pulled the plug out once when he was performing. He says, "How can you do that?"
Wow. Yeah. Amazing. Well, I have to say, no, I'm loving this line of conversation, because when I think of what you're doing in your life, you're always looking for what's new. And I have some friends. I mean, I'm a couple years younger than you are, I would say, perhaps a couple. And so a lot of my friends are saying, "Oh, it's time to retire and find a nice golf course somewhere." It's like, I can't imagine not constantly learning and innovating. And is there something in you that is always looking for what's new and how you can be creative as well?
I don't use the word new. I'm looking for what's true.
Okay.
That's a little bit of a difference. I'm curious in that sense, and I'm motivated. And I'm working around the clock, writing, especially. In my San Francisco Conservative, I talk about two poems. One poem by Tom Snyder. Is that his name? Gary Snyder, excuse me.
He's a Zen philosopher.
A beat poet, and another poem by Lawrence Ferlinghetti, another beat poet who had the bookstore and what's it called? City Lights Books.
Yeah, where Jack Kerouac used to.
Jack Kerouac. He published Kerouac. He published Ginsberg. He published even some Norman Mailer.
Wow.
And Burroughs. Forget his first name.
Edgar Burroughs.
No.
Or no, I know who you mean. I'm sorry.
William Burroughs.
I think you're right. I know who you mean. Yeah.
So stuff that was way ahead of his time. So same thing. He's looking for what's really true. And I analyze a couple of those poems in my San Francisco Conservative. It's not about San Francisco politics. It's about politics, American politics, and what cities really are, and what these poets, what they were really saying or not saying. I was a little bit critical of them. And I got permission from City Lights Books and from Tom Snyder, Gary Snyder's publisher, to go ahead, put it in the book. So I look for what's really true.
Is that something that you can teach others? I mean, is that something either you have it or you don't have it? If you are, is there any advice you can give to the rest of us, what to look for, to like kind of ferret out those truths that'll really make a difference?
It seems like, as the advice I gave students and their parents, they're saying something, I say, stop. This is what it is, and think about it. So all you have to do sometimes is just say what's true. I corrected you a second ago. What's new? I said, no, don't look for what's new. Look for what's true. And I know you got it. So that's what I just said. That's all I have to do. So that applies to everybody. I don't like to underestimate people. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to say it. They haven't heard it, but once they hear it, they know it's true.
Yeah.
That's it. Just say it.
I love it. I just want to throw in real quick before we continue on that this is a San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series. And I'm Tom Martin, your host, longtime journalist, trying to ask thought-provoking questions and of my dear friend and the brilliant author, David Parker, who's author of Income and Wealth in a San Francisco Conservative. And when you were just with that last comment that you shared with us, I was sort of envisioning you in the classroom with little students around you. Did words of wisdom occasionally come out of those young students, even though they're very young?
Yeah, that was part of the attraction. And when I was teaching, I would wait for a student to say something. It may take a week or two and latch onto that. And made that the focus of the whole semester's work.
Wow.
And so the students were really engaged. I made an announcement once in January, coming back from winter vacation, as teachers do. And I says, kids, I'm going to give you some lessons ahead of time, because in 2 weeks I'm leaving. I'm going to Paris for a couple of weeks. And one student stood up, Mr. Parker, you just came back from Christmas vacation. What's with this 2 weeks in Paris? Is it, what are we paying you for? She's 10 years old, or she was 9 years old, I think. So that kid, she got it. I told the class, that's what, that's your next principal. Another student comes up to me. I'm not sure what his family background was, but he pulled out a wad of $20 bills and flipped them out on the table. Give me a couple of those Eiffel Towers while you're there.
Oh my gosh. That's
It was just so funny. So I says, okay, because we're going to learn a French song right now. And I taught them a little Frère Jacques or Frère Jacques. I don't know. I forget what I taught them. And I had them, and we did a French piece on their instruments, and we just developed the French theme. They were asking me questions. Well, where's your apartment in Paris? And all this kind of stuff. It just went on and on. I had their attention. Nobody ever missed my class.
That's great. I love that. It's funny. I generally had pretty good teachers in the public schools in whether it was upstate New York or Miami, Florida, where I spent my high school years. But every once in a while, you'd get a teacher who they were just going through the motions. It was the same lesson plan that they used for 5 or 10 years. Clearly, you were doing the opposite of that. I can understand why your students must have loved the class. What did the principals you worked with think of that? Was that all good with them as well?
Well, there's a funny story there too. I had a principal who I liked and who thought I did a good job, and their job is to evaluate their teachers every year, because if you're not doing good, in theory, you're supposed to get better or be fired. And no teacher's ever fired. The union sees to that. But that's another story. So principal came in and watched me teach. She says, Mr. Parker, I don't know what you're doing. It's very unorthodox, but you can hear a pin drop in your class. You have them, they're absolutely transfixed. Wow. And your students perform better than any teacher I've ever had in this school. So just keep it up. I'm going to put outstanding here. I don't know what the hell you're doing. Outstanding.
Wow.
So really, I taught like I do business, right? And how I play music right on the spur of the moment.
I love it. I love it. Well, I love all of that. And before we go, we probably have a minute or two left. Since we're talking about learning and education and getting through to people, opening their minds, sort of, is there, in addition to, of course, Income and Wealth and A San Francisco Conservative, is there another book or two you'd recommend to the people who are enjoying this conversation?
Well, I write from a historical perspective, because I discovered that certain authors in certain periods of time were so highly developed that, 5th century Athens and 1st century Rome were two civilizations that are far more developed than we are. We think we're great because we have some technology. They didn't have technology, but beside that, their civilization was far more advanced than us. So you read about law and government, or theater, or science, or logic, or from the older authors from 2,000 years ago, is much better reading. And if you haven't read them, you're not educated. You're just only referring to current books. You don't know that those current books are not at the level of what was those two periods are.
So don't confine your reading list to what's on like the New York Times bestseller top 10 or something.
No, don't. When you read Aristotle, if I would read you a passage and didn't tell you it was Aristotle, you would go, man, that is pretty cool. He sounds just like we do.
I think you were telling me
Talks like we do. It's the
that
same subject. Same subject. You would not know. You would not know, but only at a higher level.
Right, right. I think you told me once that Aristotle wrote about diversity and inclusion, which people talk about now. So.
Yeah, on the subject of property, he says, Aristotle says, yeah, the state can own all the property. That's would be communism today. Or you can do a middle ground where you can keep your own home, like a European socialism or something like that. You can do that. Or you can just go free, that there's no government ownership of anything. Just go with the free, he says, because it creates diversity in society. And that's what you want.
Wow.
Well, gee, when was that written? That's 2,500 years ago. Same thing on a much better discussion. That's more interesting than what anybody's saying today.
Brilliant. No, that's really brilliant. Well, that's a perfect note to end on. I really appreciate it. And I just want to remind everyone, be sure to pick up copies of David's books, Income and Wealth and a San Francisco Conservative. You can do that by visiting his website, davidparkeressays.com, or by going to Amazon. So thanks, David. Again, I learned a lot. Thank you so much.
Okay. And all my books have an historical perspective for readers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.